We are facing a crisis of leadership. In 1938, Leon Trotsky wrote that the historical crisis of mankind was the crisis of revolutionary leadership. But what did he mean by this? At the time, the Communist International had completely failed to explain, let alone prevent, the rise of fascism in Europe. Their ultra-left madness led them to adopt all sorts of weird sectarian positions that prevented them from connecting with the masses. One of these sectarian positions is the idea of so-called social fascism. This is the idea that everyone but the communists are fascists. That meant fighting the social democrats, the Trotskyists, the liberals. They're all fascists, so the communists should fight against everybody equally. Another weird idea completely disconnected from reality was the belief that first Hitler would come to power and then that the communists would come to power, almost automatically, because the masses would at this point be so disillusioned with fascism. Evidently, that's not what happened. Besides the ultra-leftism of the communists, you also had the mass social democratic parties. The social democrats were content with radical-sounding speeches and radical gestures and May Day and other rallies. But at the end of the day, they would always end up collaborating with the ruling class against the workers and in support of capitalism. To put it simply, the working class had leaders that were either shouting only for revolution or that were unable to see the relationship between the fight for reforms and the need to overcome capitalism as a whole. And today, we're facing a very similar crisis. The left is in a sorry state. It's weak and docile, and it's dominated by reformists that refuse to break with the status quo. In doubling down their support for capitalism, they're leaving the path wide open to the rise of the far right, allowing them to tap into the anger and discontent that are so widespread in society today. To overcome this crisis of leadership, Trotsky explained that communists need to adopt a transitional method to connect with the masses. Trotsky explained the transitional method was like a bridge from the current consciousness of working people today to a socialist consciousness. The program of the Revolutionary Communist Party in Canada is exactly that bridge. For example, on the question of factory closures and lockouts even, we put forward the need to occupy those workplaces, and if they're being closed down for lack of profits or for unproductivity, then the bosses should open up the books, and if they're unfit to produce, then they should be nationalized and put under workers' control. On dealing with layoffs and inflation, Trotsky proposes a sliding scale of hours and a sliding scale of wages. Instead of laying off people, we could increase employment by reducing the hours that everybody works without loss of pay. And instead of workers paying for inflation with a reduction in their purchasing power, wages should keep up with inflation. Trotsky delves deep into these topics and more in The Death Agony of Capitalism, The Tasks of the Fourth International, or the Transitional Program for short. If you want to convince and organize more workers and youth in the fight against capitalism and for communism in our lifetimes, then you must read the Transitional Program by Trotsky. You can find it in the new edition of the Classics of Marxism, Volume 1.